Welcome to episode 5 of Believe in TCU. I'm Zion Trammell, joined by Seth Dowdle, and in today's episode, we'll talk about the heartbreaking loss that TCU suffered to UCF, as well as a recap around college football. But as always, a quick check-in. Seth, how are we doing today?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine considering the circumstances. It's
Doing better?
football in life. Football's just a game, and it's a slow, it's been a slow learning process throughout my 21 years of existence, but we're getting there. So I'm good. I'm good. It's a fine Monday morning. Ready to just let's hash this out. Let's never speak of it again. How about that?
Let's do it, because it is Monday when we're recording. There was no way I could talk about this game on a Sunday because I needed a day to process what happened with TCU and their heartbreaking loss to UCF. They lost 35-34 in a game which they led by 14 at halftime. They led 31-13 at one point and saw their lead wither away with 36 seconds to go. And yeah, I mean, TCU led for up until that point. TCU had led this game, and then KJ Jefferson led a game-winning drive to give UCF the lead. TCU had a chance to respond. They got in somewhat field goal range. It was a long field goal. It was 57 yards. It was no good, and UCF won the ball game. Seth, what are your kind of initial reactions to this loss for TCU?
Let's just go through it all, right? Let's go from beginning to end here. Started off great, 14 zip after the first quarter. Offense is humming, defense is getting stops. I mean, they blocked that field goal at the end of the first quarter. And I mean, it's a typical, like almost air raid offense, right? That TCU's running out there, and Josh Hoover could do no wrong. The receivers, Savion Williams, Jack Besh, JP Richardson, were lighting it up on the stats sheet, and then also on the scoreboard. So it was all good. 14-0. You go into the half 21-7. You've blocked 2 field goals at this point. You'll end up blocking an extra point later on, which ended up being pretty crucial. Obviously, TCU didn't win, but it would have been UCF would have won by more than 1 point had TCU not blocked those field goals. And you're looking good. The defense, while giving up some yardage, is standing strong, like a kind of a bend but don't break in that first half, only letting UCF get to the end zone once. And it's obviously, honestly, I mean, I was feeling pretty good, right? Like if you just replicate that same, you know, pattern into the second half, you're going to win the game. But UCF by, kind of gaining yards in that first half, withered down that TCU defense, especially that TCU defensive front, which lacks a lot of depth. If there's any part of the team that lacks depth, it's the defensive front. And definitely missing, a lot of, even last year it was tough. And then when, Dominic Williams leaves and it gets even worse. So
Mhm.
they just ram it down our throats for, for the last 2 quarters. Honestly, that last drive, I was like, there's no way they're going to stop them 4 times in a row. Like there's no way that they're going to stop them 4 times in a row.
That was kind of the mood. I went to the game with one of my buddies, and that was kind of the consensus around with the people around us. It's like, oh gosh, I don't know if we're gonna get a stop here. Like I couldn't believe we got a stop. It was, I think, like halfway through the fourth quarter. I
Well, the
mean,
drive before they scored the go-ahead touchdown, they get a stop, and TCU gets a chance to pretty much milk the game away with like 3.5 minutes left. And they do 2 screen passes that result for 0 yards and a pass short of the sticks, and then they punt, and it only like a minute and a half goes off the clock. That's where the inability to run the ball. I mean, like TCU was just dominated on both lines of scrimmage for a good chunk of the game. I mean, how many times did we throw the ball? Josh Hoover threw the ball. Oh, I don't know why I didn't have this open, but I mean, like they had like 18 carries and like for like 40-ish yards
Mhm.
or something like that. Yeah,
It was really low.
58 yards. TCU threw it 53 times.
And when you're winning a ball game, that's pretty unheard of. I think that was a massive problem that TCU is facing right now is their inability to run the football. While they're able to pass protect really well and protect Josh Hoover, the offensive line has not been able to get that push when they're trying to run the ball with Cam Cook. And in a game where you're leading by a lot, you need to be able to control time of possession, take time off the clock, give your defense a rest. And TCU, even when they did score, they were pretty quick possessions. And when they weren't scoring, the defense was going right back onto the field. And with the physicality that the UCF offensive line presented, and with KJ Jefferson at quarterback and RJ Harvey, just they weren't doing anything special. They were just running it down TCU's throat, but they just didn't have a lot of time to get some rest, and they were back out there. And that was a big problem for TCU.
Yeah, it was very reminiscent kind of the last 5 minutes I felt of the Fiesta Bowl. Last 5 minutes of the third quarter in the Fiesta Bowl, I should say, where like every play was just a score for both Michigan and TCU, and both defenses were like, "Can we get like 2 seconds to just pause and think for a minute?" And it's like, no, Amari DiMercado is going to run for 79 yards and get to the 1 yard line on our first play, and then JJ McCarthy throws a 70-yard pass or whatever. It was very reminiscent of that, but TCU, I mean, they were able to get points, as you said. They not in the second half, only 13 points in the second half. And when you throw it 53 times, you expect to kind of put up, and your quarterback throws for 400 plus yards. You're thinking maybe we'll put up more than 34 points. I know that's a lot. 34 points is already a lot. But whenever you were on pace for 42 at half, and to only come away with a touchdown and 2 field goals in the second half when you were gunslinging around like that, it's a little disappointing. And that last drive specifically, not the last drive where the result in the 57-yard field goal attempt, but the last drive before the UCF touchdown that gave them the lead was really disappointing. Where, I mean, you can still milk a game away through the air, and they threw 3 passes short of the sticks and gained like 6 yards.
I was not really sure what the play calling was going on there in that final drive for TCU. It was uh, pretty abysmal, but I think the game changing play for me was the 3rd and goal at the 1 yard line. And TCU had finally gotten down there, and you think, okay, phew, thank God, we're going to hopefully score a touchdown here, extend the lead to 10. Jack Besh made an incredible play, and then you get a false start at the 1 yard line, and it pushes you back 5 yards. They get an incomplete pass. And Sonny said after the game, he actually said that if he were to do it over again, he wishes he probably would have gone for it. Instead, they settle for the field goal. They go up 6. I don't necessarily hate that, going for the field goal there, but you just needed some points. But really, I mean, that wouldn't have been a situation had they not gotten a false start. It would have probably been resulted in a touchdown. And that was a critical penalty for the Frogs.
Yeah, because if they score the touchdown, they probably win the game.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's 10
Yeah.
points. How much time was left at that point?
There wasn't, I think there might have been 6 minutes, something around
There were
there.
4 minutes left. 4 minutes and 54
Mm-hmm.
seconds left. You score a touchdown there, you're up by 10. UCF probably goes down and scores another touchdown. Probably. But the way that the UCF offense was kind of running was that, I mean, it was kind of like it was a very much of a slower process for UCF offensively. And that's what by design, that's what they wanted, right? They're going to milk the clock and they're going to make you just get tired. And that's what they did. I mean, they ran like 3 plays. It was either RJ
Mm-hmm.
Harvey runs right up the middle, a little kind of jet sweep action where they fake it to the wide receiver and KJ keeps it,
Mm-hmm.
or just a design run for the quarterback. And then they ran a couple pass plays too.
Yeah, they mixed that a little bit, That was a slight element of the UCF offense. Was it weird for you because you're kind of an Arkansas fan, sort of, that I guess you could designate that as like your second school, second team. Was it weird seeing KJ Jefferson in a UCF jersey going up against TCU, or was it just like,
No,
I'm
honestly,
done
like
seeing you?
he fits way better in this offense than he ever did at Arkansas. He looks
I
so much more
agree.
comfortable
He
with
does.
whatever that was. I mean, like what that was just like bully ball.
It was. It was
And
like,
what
we're
when he
just
was
gonna impose our will.
what's even crazier is like he was in a Kendall Briles offense 2 years ago.
That's true.
Like Kendall Briles was the offensive coordinator at Arkansas, and they ran the ball a lot. And then you come to TCU, and I was expecting when he was hired, I was like, I'm kind of, I mean, I have my doubts. I have a lot of doubts, but I'm very excited because I think he'll be able to bring in a pretty, dynamic run game because that's what he was able to do at Arkansas. And then that's the one thing we're talking about. One of the things we're talking about today is that TCU cannot run the ball.
They can't. I mean, there's just nothing. There's no lanes. There's nothing innovative about TCU trying to run the football right now. It's just not working at this point. But I think we've talked enough about the negatives, the running game, the defensive line, the defense as a whole struggled against UCF. I think there were definitely some positives that you could take away from this game. Obviously, Josh Hoover played out of his mind. 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. That touchdown pass to Jack Besh was one of the prettiest throws I've ever seen him make. He just looked very comfortable. His offensive line gave him time. You could just see him get into a rhythm, and he's got really good chemistry with with his receivers. I think Josh Hoover is becoming a extremely legitimate quarterback at right now, and he's only a sophomore, and he looks incredible so far.
Yeah, the passing game is very good. It's a very good passing offense. And if you're going to take anything away, that's what I'd take away is that here's the thing. Every Big 12 game, I feel like, is going to be very similar to this in terms of closeness of score. TCU is going to be in a lot of games this year because the talent level of the Big 12 is very similar to one another. There are not a lot of teams in the Big 12 that are better than UCF. There's a lot of teams that are around the same level as UCF, in my opinion, personally. And TCU will play SMU next week. We'll see how that goes. But I expect that the offense will be able to hum, at least in the passing game. So that's something that obviously you take away as a positive. The receivers are legit. Like this might be the best three receivers at TCU since 22. Last year was kind of a struggle, but this year it really they're just running wide open sometimes. And so that's very encouraging. I do like how the offensive line protects them, but I wish that they could push. They are very good at blocking backwards, but they cannot get that push. I don't really know why. I'm not an offensive line guru, but it's whatever. So yeah, I guess that's the one positive. The rest though is kind of wish wash because I don't think you can take any positives away from the defensive performance.
There was nothing that you could say was positive. Obviously, the special teams, they made special plays
They did.
in
They
that
did. They
game.
made
Special
three
teams,
big
special
plays
players.
that ended up keeping TCU in the game. Essentially,
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah, they
they kept a touchdown. They kept 7 points off the board for UCF. 2 field goals, an extra point.
I know the first one I was like, "Oh, okay, nice. Like, I'll take it." And then the second one happens, I'm like, "What is going on? Why is this happening?" And the third time, I just was like, "We're just gonna block every kick for the rest of the year at this point." I mean, we could consider this now. And
We
then the
can.
one that, except for the final one, I think everyone in the stadium with that extra point, that was probably the most nerve wracking extra point in the history of college football. When
Yeah, given
UCF
the
tried to take the
context
lead.
of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone was thinking, "Oh my goodness, they might actually block this." And UCF fans were so nervous, and then they made it and they went crazy. So, but nonetheless, it's a tough TCU loss for sure. It would have been nice to open up conference play and pick up a win. For me personally, I looked at this game as if they won this football game, I feel much better about how this season may go. And I know it's early, it's only week 3, but you open up a conference play with a good win against a good UCF team. You think, okay, this team, can go places. Now that kind of hangs in the balance a little bit. You have the matchup with SMU, then you've got Kansas and Utah. Those are some pivotal games where the Horned Frogs kind of have to prove themselves again and say, hey, you know, we're still a really good football team. I think that's the mindset in the locker room right now, just hearing from some of the guys post game, is we still believe that this doesn't change how we feel as a football team. Obviously, they're probably going to say that, but
Yeah.
I think there's still a little bit of optimism, but it's hard to be excited after a loss like that where you held a lead at home and your defense got shredded and you can't run the football,
Yeah, one of the quickest ways to demoralize a fan base is to play a game like that early in the season,
especially
um,
at home.
especially at home in front of a pretty good crowd. And so, um, you start conference play 0-1, you're on the back foot. Um, and I guess we'll just see what happens. You got the Kansas game coming up; they're going to run the ball. You got the Utah game coming up; they're going to run the ball. You don't think SMU's looking at that tape thinking, "Okay, let's do something like that." And so it's definitely a little nerve wracking because there are a lot of teams in the Big 12 that can play a similar style ish to what UCF can do, which is they like to run through you. The Big 12's reputation has kind of changed the last couple of years. It used to be a league where we kind of ran where teams like to run around you, right? Like those Oklahoma teams that would score like 70 points a game. Those were teams that were running around you. It's kind of changed a little bit with the K States and the Oklahoma States, becoming the premier teams in the conference where this is a league where people are going to want to run through you. And then, Utah comes in. That's the style of play that they like to play. UCF certainly is like that. So TCU is going to run into teams like this again. It's just about how they respond. Can they figure out I don't know, maybe if it's better conditioning and practice because there's a lack of depth there. So you gotta figure out a way to get the bodies that are on there rested and refreshed because they're going to be seeing a lot of this in conference play, especially after the first game. You put this on tape, and teams are like, "Oh, we might be able to do that too."
All right, let's move on. We're going to talk a little bit about college football this past weekend. There wasn't a lot of excitement. There wasn't a ton of great matchups, but there were some good games. The one that obviously caught a lot of people's attention was the LSU and South Carolina game that ended a little bit controversially, maybe to the favor of the Tigers, but they survived and picked up a win. And I think that was a pretty fun. I mean, for me, it was a pretty fun game to watch because I didn't really care who won. I don't really. I mean, LSU, South Carolina, who cares for me? But I think it was an important win for the Tigers, and it was a good game.
It was fun. It was entertaining. That was a really good crowd in Columbia. They were into it, and it kind of sucks that result went, the other way because, um, honestly, I mean, for a good chunk of that game, South Carolina was in command. Um, LSU couldn't get out of their own way, and the refs may or may not won the Tigers a game. I don't know. I don't know.
They might have.
They might have. They might have. But it was really fun. It was a fun game. Whenever College Game Day said that we're going to Columbia, I was like, okay, that's a good. I mean, like, there has to be better options, but at the same time, that's a really underrated home environment. When Williams-Brice Stadium gets pumping, it gets pumping, and it ended up being the best game of the week, I think, in my opinion. So
I agree. It was definitely the game of the week in my opinion. One that I didn't expect to be talking about, but here we are. Georgia and Kentucky. The Bulldogs barely survived, winning 13-12. I didn't watch this game. I was at the TCU game. So, did you watch it at all, Seth?
didn't get a lot of eyes on it. Was keeping tabs with it though. So I don't know if like the game itself is reminiscent at all to what I'm about to say, but this reminds me of a game back in 22. Early in the season, Georgia goes to Missouri, and they struggle against Missouri. In fact, Mizzou almost wins the game in a couple of uh, untimely decisions by the Mizzou coaching staff kind of cost them the game, including I think there was a punt that they punted the ball when they probably shouldn't have punted, or a field goal or whatever, which is what happened in the Kentucky game uh, on
Yeah.
Saturday night. And we were all, after that game against Mizzou, we were like, man, Georgia might not be as good as we think they are. And then they won the national championship. So I don't I don't know if I want to put too much stock early on. It might have been just one of those things where they're like, they looked at Kentucky, who got beat 30-6 against South Carolina last week, and they're like, oh, we can just go in there and cruise because we're Georgia. And then obviously that doesn't happen, which is rare for that coaching staff, I feel like, to have a team that is unprepared. But I don't know if I'm going to put too much stock in it. Obviously, the polls did. Texas is number 1 this week, but
They did.
it's a big deal. Big deal.
It is a big deal. I think it's the first time since 2008 that Texas is ranked number 1 in the country. And yeah, I wouldn't be really too worried at all if I was a Georgia fan. I mean, I almost wish Missouri had won 2 years ago, because maybe things could have ended up differently for TCU.
Maybe they would have. I don't know. Yeah,
Maybe we wouldn't have had to play them in the national championship.
maybe not.
Who knows?
Maybe not. But all's well. All's well. Here we are.
Hey, we're hanging on. Yeah, we're doing
hanging
okay.
on. I would die to be a Georgia fan, though. I think that a lot of I saw some Georgia fans talking about who has it worse, Georgia fans or some other thing, and I was like, what are y'all talking about?
Who has it worse? What?
I know, right? Yeah, I know. Yeah.
That's I mean, maybe like Patriots fans. Like, I mean, what are we
Yeah, Celtic
comparing
fans
here?
for
Like,
sure.
yeah, so like, what? That makes zero sense. But hey, good for Texas. Number 1 in the country. As a former UT fan,
Got it.
I'm slightly happy for him.
Yeah, got to keep an eye on that Ewers injury, but looks like they got a pretty good backup.
Yeah, his last name looks a little familiar.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know.
He had
He
4
seems
touchdown
related.
passes.
He seems related to somebody. I don't know who,
No,
but
I know. Oh, I don't know the
hey,
guy. Never heard of him.
that last name if you have that last name, I feel like that's a good quarterback last name. Like, I'm sure there's got to be someone that's played good at that position with that last name.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be
Pretty sure.
someone out there.
At least 2 people.
Yeah, Eli Manning. I think
Peaton?
that's yeah.
Peaton?
Peaton.
Peaton?
Yeah, I've heard of them, but I'm
Yeah.
not too familiar. Anyways, were there any other
That's
games that
ridiculous.
really caught your eye at all, or was it just
Not really.
It's kind of a boring weekend.
It was. I mean, yeah, and I was very much looking forward to the TCU game all week long. I was very excited. I was very much like you, where I was like, if we beat them, I have my expectations, which were already slightly high given my season prediction, but like I become a little validated, I guess. You know what I mean? And 9-3 is certainly still on the table. Like that's like not out of the deck of the cards, but I guess Florida State sucks. That would be the other thing that I'd look at.
They do.
DJU might actually end up just being a regular DJ at this rate. That might be his career path. Chandler Morris threw 3 interceptions, I think, against Texas Tech. I actually watched a good chunk of this game, sadly. Yeah,
Wow.
Chandler Morris has 3 interceptions against Tech. 66-21 final. Texas Tech over North Texas. And then I guess the final thing is that Washington State beat Washington 24-19.
Good job, Washington State.
Way
to rep the Pac-2.
ready to wrap the Pac-2, which is back. That's a talk for another day. But I did see a quote after the game. The head coach, he was like, "We won this game not because we hated them so much, but because we loved each other so much." And I was like, that's coach speak right there. That's
That's
coach
awesome.
speak.
That's yeah. Man, how about it, huh? Washington State beating Washington. Good for them.
Oregon State did not perform quite well against Oregon, though. I am glad that they played those games. I'm glad that Oregon and Washington agreed to play those games this year. I'm not happy with what they did to leave the Pac-12, but I'm happy that they at least agreed to play those games, and I hope they play them every year.
I hope so too. I think it's important for the sake of both schools, especially for Washington State and Oregon State, that they continue to play those games, keep that rivalry going, because we need more of those in college football. And TCU is abandoning one after this week, so
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, like, I wish that Oklahoma and Oklahoma State were going to play this year. Like, it sucks that that's not happening. I wish Colorado and Nebraska played every year. That's a rivalry that we need to bring back. There's tons that I can just mention off of Missouri, Kansas. They don't play every year anymore. I mean, it's a shame. We need to bring it back. Miami, Florida is an underrated one that is not played every year. It was played this year, but it is not played every year anymore.
yeah, that would be good.
Pitt, West Virginia was this week. They don't play that every year. I need to bring that one back consistently. So yeah, conference realignment. I know this is not a new thing. Kind of sucks though.
It does. It definitely has changed the landscape of college football and just a lot of different things. It's just going to take some time to get used to, and we'll see what happens. But that'll wrap things up for this episode. In the next episode, we'll talk. We'll to give a preview for TCU versus SMU this Saturday. Hey, we might talk about the new Pac-12. We might give that a look and talk other things college football. But yeah, again, that'll wrap things up. Thank you for tuning in to Believe in TCU. You can follow us on Instagram at Believe in TCU. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, really wherever you get your podcasts, you can listen to us there. But for Seth Dowdle, I'm Zion Trammell. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode, and we'll see you guys next time.